Hello, this is the third video in my series about how to use Google Forms to do a class quiz or test or assessment. And we're to the fun one. This one we get to see how we're going to use the Add-On Flubaroo to grade this quiz once the student responses are all in. So we're going to start out here in the response spreadsheet. Again, you can get to this from Drive. It'll have the same title as your form, but it'll say responses next to it. You can also get to it from the form by clicking on View Responses, and that'll just open this spreadsheet in a new tab. So you can see that I've given the students the quiz, and I have taken the quiz myself. This is the very first line right here. This is my own responses. And the very first thing you're going to need to do in order to use Flubaroo as a grading tool is you will need to take your own quiz. That will become the answer key. You may have noticed that when we created the form, we weren't marking any correct answers because Google Forms really isn't designed as a classroom assessment piece, so it doesn't give you that option to say this is a correct response. We're going to do that here in our response sheet by taking the quiz ourselves with all the correct acceptable answers filled in. So this very first line here, row 2, you can see that it has my username on it. So I know that this first one is the answer key. The rest of these are my student responses. Okay, so you'll want to make sure that you have taken the quiz yourself so that you have that answer key provided. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is I need to get the add-on Flubaroo. To do that, from my spreadsheet, I want to go to add-ons. And you can see that I've got a couple add-ons already, but I'm going to go to Get Add-ons. And chances are Flubaroo is going to pop right up because it's extremely popular. Look at that number of users. If for some reason it does not, you can search right over here in the search box for Flubaroo. I just like to say Flubaroo. Okay, so when I click on it, or I could have shortcutted right there, we just want to click on this blue Free button to say that we want this. And it's going to make us allow. You have to scroll all the way to the bottom to find that blue Allow button. We want to click that. Okay, so it is installing Flubaroo as an add-on in my spreadsheet. And it's telling me a few things and welcoming me, so I'm going to close those things out. Okay, so now when I go to add-ons, now I see Flubaroo as one of my options. If I hover over that, I can see my different Flubaroo tasks that are available. So I'm going to go to Grade Assignment. Okay, now it's first going to bring up this box, and it's asking me to check all of the fields in my spreadsheet and let Flubaroo know what needs to be graded and which fields are just identifying the student. I also can select my number of points. Okay, so this first one, the username, that identifies the student, so it's not going to be included in the grading. The next one is where I've asked them to give me what block they're in, class 1, class 2, and so that's also identifying the student. It's not part of their actual grade, so you can see that the points are marked out. If that for some reason Flubaroo doesn't correctly identify that, you can always come over here and click this and tell it, Flubaroo, which way it should handle that field. Okay, but it does a pretty good job. So here's my first question. That I do want to be normal grading, and I want it to be 1 point. So I'm just going to go through all of my questions here and make sure that Flubaroo has correctly identified them the way that I want them to be. If there's a question along the way here that I want to grade myself by hand, all I have to do is come over here and choose Grade by Hand. If it's one that I don't want to have graded at all, maybe it's just a silly question or I'm just collecting some information from the students, I can choose Skip Grading as well. I can also change the number of points I want for each question in my quiz. So I'm going to go through all my questions like that and check this. Really, it does, like I said, it does a pretty good job. You may not have to change anything at all. So when I'm ready, I move on to Continue. Okay, now it's asking me to identify the answer key. Which response in that spreadsheet needs to serve as the answer key? So again, I told you that you'll want to take your own quiz. Make sure you've done that before you try going through these steps so that you have something that you can select. I want to select this one that's submitted by me. So there's my answer key. Continue. It's going to compare all the other responses against that one. It also will not include that one in the averages or any of the statistics. Okay, so Flubaroo is grading my assignment. Now when it does this, it's creating a new tab down here. And it does pop up this little thing that gives you some additional tips that you can go check out. Okay, so Flubaroo has created a new sheet. Here are my student submissions, like we saw earlier, but it's added a new sheet in my spreadsheet. And this one is showing me all the graded responses. They are color-coded, and I can see the students' total number of points. I can see it as a percentage. The ones that have been missed, if I scroll across here, you can see how many points it's giving. So it awarded 0 points for these responses, 1 point for these other responses. If you want to see what the student actually put, you will need to come back over here to student submissions to see the actual answer that they put in. Okay, some other nice features. It is giving me a class average, so I can have the average number of points. I can see how many students have submitted it. I can see how many points it was possible. If I scroll down under each question, I really like this feature. Under each question, I can see the average for that question. So I can quickly scroll across here and see if there are any questions that the students really didn't do very well on. In fact, if this average is below 70%, it will highlight those in a special color, which I didn't really demonstrate for you here. Also, on my students, you see that this one student shows up in red. That is because that student scored lower than a 70%. So it's bringing to your attention students who were struggled on this quiz. You can change that threshold if you don't like 70% as the marker point. Up here in your add-ons under Flubaroo, if you go to Advanced, you have some different options. I'm going to go to Advanced Options here. And right here is that 70%, and I can change that if I would like. Okay. Another great option that shows up there, if I go to Advanced, I can enable auto grading. This is a nice feature because you always have students who come in late, miss a day, and have to take the quiz later. You want to go ahead and grade the rest of the class maybe, but you're going to get another response later. So if you enable auto grading, it's going to walk you through those same steps. The only difference is that when a new response comes into this form, it will automatically regrade and give you updated statistics with that new score included as well. One last thing I want to show you, you do have the option to email grades, assuming that if you're at a school that has the student email set up, you can email the grades to the students. It sends them a beautiful color-coded report of their responses, whether they were right or wrong, and it does a really nice job with that. That only works, of course, if you do have student email enabled within Google, if you have students have Google email. All right, so there's how you would use Flubaroo to grade your assessment. If you have any questions, as always, please contact me.